Welcome back to the Pylon Cam Podcast, episode 9. I am your host, Mike Frisella, and we have a fantastic show prepared for you today, a fantastic episode prepared for you today, a fantastic day prepared for you today. I'm going to make your day better somehow. I will do it, I promise. And I just want to give a shout out to all the winners tuning in to this channel, because only winners listen to this podcast, only winners listen to this channel, only winners win, and we win on this podcast. There were a bunch of stories from the NFL this week that I kind of want to handpick. I went ahead and handpicked some stories to talk through. I think I kind of want to, moving forward with this podcast, as I try to figure out what to talk about, what stories to go through, and what to even break down. I try to talk about as many teams as I can. That's one of my goals. I don't like to be biased towards some teams, but unfortunately, some teams, the same teams, produce the multiple stories. Like, for example, Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers and the Packers always have a story to talk about. Before we go through the stories, there is one story in particular I want to talk about, or one thing that someone said I want to talk about, because I think that it's very important that we talk about it, and I think what he said is very important for the current status of America and how we view things. You know, I have a platform, even though it's a mighty small platform, I still have one, and I think that, you know, with every opportunity you have the opportunity to, you know, use it for good or use it for bad. And there's one story in particular I do want to highlight, because I think this person's response to what has been unhappening, which is a pretty big deal in not only the NFL world but the sports world, I think their response speaks volumes about them as a person, and I think it goes farther to really, I think it's a great example for how we should handle situations like this as a society in America. And the first story I do want to talk through is Derek Carr. I think that if you haven't heard, or if you've been kind of under a rock for the past few days, basically what had happened was a bunch of emails surfaced from John Gruden, using multiple emails of him using racist, misogynistic, and homophobic comments, which inevitably, 2 days after these emails were released, he resigned as head coach from the Las Vegas Raiders. And Carl Nassib, one of the only openly gay player in the NFL, took a personal day, and the Raiders organization as a whole is kind of shaken up over this, because this is a person that, you know, they put a lot of faith in John Gruden. They put a lot of faith in him. They signed him for $100 million for 10 years. I mean, it was the biggest contract in coaching history. He was the richest coach in the NFL because of this contract. And I just think that, you know, you could turn on the television, you could turn on the radio, and you could turn on a podcast even, and you could hear someone get up there and say, oh, well, John Gruden needs to be canceled. He needs to be cast off onto Mars. He has no place for what he, on Earth or in America, for what he said. And there really is no place for what he said in America. There's no place for that ever on any country in the world. You should never talk to someone or talk about someone in the ways that John Gruden did. But I want to read, Derek Carr and John Gruden have a very close relationship. I think John Gruden was actually building a house next to Derek Carr in Las Vegas, and they were going to be neighbors. And this was a very close relationship that they had, and there's a lot of mutual respect between the two. And Derek Carr and John Gruden wanted to build the Raiders around Derek Carr. He was his cornerstone. He was his first pillar in which they were going to build this potential dynasty on. And, John Gruden is no longer in the picture, and the Raiders are kind of scrambling. And I don't even want to talk about how this affects football. I just want to talk about what Derek Carr said. And Derek Carr, these are the comments he used in reference to his former coach. Quote, "No one's perfect. It's hard because I love the man so much," Carr said. "I have family members that have done the same things. I think more than anything, Coach needs people to love him. But at the same time, what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong." End quote. And I think that there's more to what Derek Carr said and there's more to this article, and there's more to that interview. But I think too often in America, people are so quickly to jump to hate, and irrationally hate. Not that anything John Gruden said is, there's no irrationality in hating what John Gruden said. But I think that, what Derek Carr, what the title for this article is, and what the biggest headline or quote from Derek Carr's comments were, "I love the man, I hate the sin. No one's perfect." And when you hear the word sin, it's pretty obvious to what Derek Carr affiliates with in his religion. He is a practicing Christian. And whether you agree with Christianity or not, I do think that this stance of exercising love instead of answering hate with hate is a kind of a lost art in America. We hear so often that we are a culture of love, and we have so many cultures of love, but so often in those cultures that abide by loving endlessly and loving relentlessly often spew the most hate towards people that don't align with what they love or what they stand for. And I think that one of the biggest things coming from this article that, speaks to who Derek Carr is as a person is what John Gruden did was heinous, and it's not okay what he did. I'm not saying any of that, but he still is a human being, and he still is someone who, has emotions, has feelings, has a family, is a person. And I think Derek Carr is absolutely right in saying to hate what he did, but that doesn't mean we should hate John Gruden. That doesn't mean we should hate anybody who's done that, because if we are a society that is to love relentlessly and to just let love win, to use that phrase, you can't let love be overtaken by hate. You can't hate someone to the point of you would kill them, or you can't hate someone to the point where you want harm upon them. You need to hate what they did, but you still need to love, who they are and what they do. And myself, as a practicing Christian, I do agree with Derek Carr that what John Gruden did was horrible. And it really is unforgivable, and he does deserve to lose everything he is losing. But for people to use this as an opportunity to get up on a high horse and condemn John Gruden to make themselves look better and look more righteous and look better in society, I think that is pathetic, and I think that it just kind of adds to the fact that we just are a selfish group of people. We are a selfish society, and that, we see one man's downfall as an opportunity to promote ourselves. I think that's what a lot of people do. I really don't think people actually care what John Gruden did or care for why it was wrong, but care more about how can I use this as an opportunity to promote myself? How can I use this as an opportunity to make myself look better in the media? How can I use this as an opportunity to look better on the news? I think that is one of the biggest problems, and I think that Derek Carr's response is honestly perfect, because I don't think his response makes him look any better. I don't think his response makes him even look good. I think a lot of people didn't like that response and wanted Derek Carr to say, as a captain of the Raiders franchise, F John Gruden, and I hope he goes and rots in hell. And I think that responding by saying that responding to something that is so hateful towards so many people groups with love speaks volumes to Derek Carr. So I just wanted to start this episode with that. I really think that if you haven't heard if you haven't read the article, if you haven't heard the interview, definitely go check it out and definitely think about it. It's something that I think a lot of what Derek Carr said is what America thinks they do, but does not actually do. So definitely check out that interview. And on a lighter note, let's get into the other stories from this week. And this one is titled, "Are the Raiders Ready to Rumble?" It's a good question, because the Raiders did start 3-0. I have had them pegged as a fraud, but now my reason for having them pegged as a fraud is gone. In that my only reason for them being frauds was because of John Gruden. Now John Gruden is out of the picture, and the emotions of John Gruden are also out of the picture. And apparently all the hate from John Gruden is also out of the picture. But the Raiders, through 5 weeks, have the number 2 passing offense in the NFL. They have the 29th rushing offense in the NFL. But they are 11th in yards per game, 19th in points per game, and 9th in time of possession. But let's look at some of the teams they've played who have good defenses. The Ravens, which they won that game, and the Chargers, who have a very good defense. And they played for a while without Josh Jacobs, So those rushing stats are definitely negatively skewed. But I think this week, definitely I would take a bet on the Raiders, because I think in the NFL there is an 80% win percentage of coaches who have, or of teams who have an interim coach for a week. We saw every coach that came in last season, because of all of COVID and everything that was going on during COVID, had a 100% win rate. So I think that this Ravens defense is still really good. They're 25th in rushing yards allowed per game. They're 4th in passing yards against per game, but they have played some high-powered offenses in the Ravens, in Pittsburgh, in the Chargers for sure. So we'll see how they bounce back. They are 17th in points allowed per game, but they're 12th in sacks and 28th in takeaways. So the Raiders are definitely in an interesting spot. We're going to see how they bounce back. We're going to see how they bounce back through this season, and we're going to see how they kind of come back from this whole John Gruden debacle, because it does, one of the most important things that is so overlooked for NFL teams is, one, the coaching situation, and two, what does the locker room look like? Because if you have a good coach who's lost the locker room, the season's over. If you have players who show up every week who don't want to play, the season's over. Carl Nassib, who's probably the best defensive lineman on this Raiders team, took a personal day. And we don't know how he's going to look at Derek Carr for his response, because Nassib could be someone who wanted Derek Carr to go out and say, how could you not hate John Gruden? How could you not hate that man? So we don't know what this is going to look like. We don't know how this is going to shape up in the locker room. And we don't know, the NFL predominantly is African-American, and we don't know how the African-American Raiders players are going to respond to Derek Carr and his leadership. I think so often and so easily it's easier to respond to situations like this with hatred. And I think hatred does bring people together, believe it or not. But I think that it'll be interesting, because this Raiders team could either come out and be more unified by this and be more unified by what Derek Carr said, or, they could come out and they could just fall apart. The wheels could fall off. They're pretty much, they're a team where, just looking at the numbers right now, they're a good team. They do things well on both sides of the ball. They have their weaknesses, particularly in rushing on offense and stopping the run on defense, but they're good. They're a good team. They're efficient in the red zone. They score points. They pass the ball down the field. They're very good at explosive plays. Obviously, we want to see more takeaways. They only have 1 interception on the season, which is not good. But this Raiders team has promise. And I have been a hater on the Raiders all season, but that was unironically because of John Gruden. I had no idea he was a racist, a homophobe, misogynist, all of that. But I just thought he was a terrible head coach. And the stats about John Gruden back me up, and I guess John Gruden as a person supports my claim that he's not a good head coach. But I don't know are the Raiders ready to rumble? I have no idea. Let's see their schedule, who they play coming up. They have Denver this week. I think they're going to win. I think they're going to beat Denver this week, just because of why. I think a big reason of why teams are so good when head coaches come in is because you don't know what to expect from an interim head coach. You don't know how they're going to play. Are they going to continue to play how they have for the past 5 weeks, or are they going to start to do something new? So I know one coordinator that came in last season, Freddie Kitchens for the New York Giants, when Jason Garrett had COVID, upset the Seahawks without Daniel Jones. So I think there is that element of surprise that plays a huge, crucial factor into this game. And they have a very easy schedule coming up. They have Denver this week, which I think they'll win. They have the Eagles next week. I think they'll win that. They have the bye week to kind of get their ducks in order. And then they come off the bye into the Giants and the Chiefs, and who knows what the Chiefs are going to look like by mid-November. They could be in the same spot they are now, and the Raiders have the better defense than the Chiefs in almost every aspect, so who knows what that, and it's a divisional game, so who knows what that'll look like. The Raiders could really, over the next 3 games stretch, advance to 6-2, and then they play the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Cowboys, which is a tough stretch. Looking at their schedule, they'll probably finish around because they got they got Washington in December, and the Chiefs again, then Cleveland. So win, L, win, L. So they'll finish around 500, I think. I think they're a 500 team. They got a really tough schedule down the stretch. They play the Chargers, the Colts, the Cleveland Browns, Dallas, Cincinnati, the Chiefs twice. It'll be interesting to see how they shape up. But I don't know what the Raiders' outlook looks like for the season, especially in the immediate. I have no idea what this team's going to look like this week against the Broncos. It could be a disaster, but it could also be. It depends on what the locker room looks like. I think the favorability of the Raiders is within their head coach, but if everybody hates each other and there's so much discord in the locker room, who knows what's going to happen. But the next story I want to talk about is I titled it "Stats Are for Suckers," a Packers tale. So if you haven't heard Matt LaFleur's comments, he doesn't care about stats. He doesn't care about statistics. He doesn't care about analytics. He cares about wins and losses. And he said that since week 1, they have stacked 4 wins, which is true. They have won 4 games, but I think that is a very arrogant and foolish take on stats, because I think Joe Judge got a lot of flack for what he said a few weeks ago, the head coach of the Giants, when he said, if analytics determined football, Bill Gates would be killing it. And that quote was ripped out of context. It's a very funny quote, but if you look at the full article of what he said, or the full quote, he basically was saying that he uses analytics to determine his options, but he picks his option based on the tide of the game, which is true. Like, you use analytics to say, like, what's going to happen if I go for it on 4th down here. And I'm not saying Joe Judge makes good decisions on 4th down or anything like that. I think he's terrible on 4th down. But sorry, I had to fix my microphone. But I think that, with Matt LaFleur, he should definitely be looking at his analytics, because this Packers team, like I've been saying, if you follow the podcast, if you follow the channel, I've been saying this for a while now, that the Packers are frauds, and it's going to catch up with them. I just want to highlight a few stats here. So they're 17th on offense. They're 17th in passing yards per game. They're 21st in rushing yards per game, so they can't run the ball. They're 21st in total yards per game. They're 13th in points per game, and I'm interested to see how many of those points came in the third or fourth quarter. And they're 10th in time of possession. So their defense. They're 10th in passing yards per game, which is good. They're 11th in rushing yards per game, which is good. And they're 6th in total yards per game, which is good. But they're 19th in points against per game, 23rd in sacks, and 6th in interceptions. But let's look at who they've played. New Orleans Saints week 1, which they lost to, who has the 31st ranked passing offense in the NFL. The Detroit Lions, who competed with them for 2 whole quarters and put 25 on them, 17 on them. The 49ers, who aren't the best team offensively. So, running backs, they played Alvin Kamara, who dominated them. DeAndre Swift and Jamal Williams, who had good games that week. San Francisco, who's banged up, but dropped 28 on them. Pittsburgh, who they played with no receivers at all. I think that game, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool were out. And Cincinnati, who dropped 22 on them. And then they going into the next set of games, they play Chicago, who knows what that looks like. Washington, who throws the ball pretty well. I don't think that'll be a good game for Washington. But then they play Arizona, the Chiefs, the Vikings. They play Seattle. Excuse me. I'm just skipping over that game because Russell Wilson's out. The Rams, and they go into a bye. And they play Chicago again, the Ravens, the Browns, the Vikings, and Detroit. So they have a very tough schedule down the stretch. They have a few easy layup games of Washington, Seattle, and Detroit. But all of those teams, what do they do well? And do it miles better than any of the teams they played. Throw the ball and run the ball. So, again, I don't know. Like, Aaron Rodgers is 4-1 right now, but he was barely able to beat San Francisco. He was barely able to beat Pittsburgh. He was barely able to beat Cincinnati. What's going to happen when they play the Cardinals, the Chiefs, Minnesota, the Rams, Baltimore, Cleveland, and the Vikings again? The Vikings are a very good team, and they have not earned the respect and credit for how good they actually are, but they still are that good. They still are that dominant on offense. They're top 10 in every metric, I think, on offense. But let's go to the next story. I think that Matt LaFleur that is very dumb to say that you don't care about analytics, because if you looked at your analytics and were comfortable with them, you would be that's not a wise move, because you have to look at who you've played and where they rank. And I don't think that any of the teams you played are stack up nearly as well as the teams that you're going to face down the stretch. Like, they don't stack up nearly as well as the Rams. The Chiefs, whose defense is a complete mess, but they're still going to beat you in a shootout. The Cardinals, who are absolutely on fire. And the Vikings, who are turning it around and are probably going to bounce back to 3-3 this weekend. And then you play the Ravens, who are like arguably the best team in the AFC, besides the Bills. The Browns, who are right behind the Ravens. And then the Vikings again. In a divisional game against the Lions, like, you barely beat them the first time. What does that look like the second time when they have a full season under their belt? They're going to win the division, but I'm telling you that this team is not good enough to make a run in the playoffs. This whole last dance charade that Aaron Rodgers is going for is nothing short of just a charade. It's nothing more than that. So, I don't know. Aaron Jones is not playing that well. He's averaging 4.4 yards per carry. A.J. Dillon on 20 less snaps or attempts is averaging literally the same amount of yards per carry. Kylan Hill is rushing for 3.1 yards per carry. And I get it, they don't have David Bakhtiari back yet, but this team is still like, this defense is bad, and they have Kevin King as their cornerback too, who constantly gets burned. He's constantly getting burned. I don't know, like, Stephon Gilmore was bought from the Panthers for literally a potato. They gave a 2023 sixth-round pick. I think so many teams just were so certain he was going to fall to free agency, and kudos to the Panthers for being aggressive enough to offer literally anything to go out and get him. I think it was foolish for the Packers to not make an offer on him, or at least call to see if people are making offers on him. But that's going to do it for this story. Let's go to the next one. This one I have titled Tua or Tua Not. There is no try. I think that there's a big story with Tua coming back this weekend, and Tua's going to save this franchise. Tua. I just want to point something out about Tua. In 2 games, he got hurt in the beginning of the second game. But the point remains, a full game under his belt, he has 17 completions on 31 attempts, with the completion percentage of 54.8% for 215 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception, and a quarterback rating of 74. Whereas Jacoby Brissett, through really 3 games, has 103 completions on 158 attempts, a 10% higher completion percentage than Tua, for 858 yards, 170 more yards per game, quadruple the amount of touchdowns and 2 interceptions. And I have been saying this for a while now. When Tua comes back, what does he add to the offense? Because right now, Jacoby Brissett is grading out better than Tua in literally every single metric. And looking at the numbers right now, the Dolphins' offense is still dead last in the NFL. 30th in passing yards per game, 32nd in rushing yards per game, 31st in total yards per game, 31st in points per game, and 30th in time of possession. And their defense, which was supposed to be good, is 26th in passing yards against per game, 24th in rushing yards against per game, 30th in total yards against per game, 30th in points against per game. Sacks, they're ranked 27th. In interceptions, they're 23rd. And who have they played? They've had a pretty tough schedule. They played New England, which is always a good team. The Bills, who smacked them. The Raiders, who, again, Jacoby Brissett put 28 points on them. The Colts, who they scored 17 points on. And Tampa Bay, which they scored 17 points on. And now down the stretch, they have Jacksonville and Atlanta, which are games where Tua could look to bounce back if he plays against Jacksonville. If he doesn't put up points against Jacksonville, you got to move off of him, in my opinion. That's bad. That is really bad. Yeah, they have a really nice schedule actually coming up. They have Jacksonville, Atlanta, then they play Buffalo, tough game. But then they play Houston, then they play Baltimore, tough game. Then they play the Jets, then they play Carolina, tough game. The Giants could be a tough game. Bye week. Then they play the Jets, New Orleans, Tennessee, and New England. So they have the potential to kind of like somewhat turn around, or at least see what you have in Tua, but I'm not banking on it. I think just looking at the small sample size we have, I don't think Tua is it, and I think if you want to start stacking wins, you keep Jacoby Brissett in for at least these 2 weeks against Jacksonville, Atlanta, and just roll with Brissett. I don't know what Tua is going to add to this offense. I don't know if Tua is going to make Jalen Waddle any better. I don't know if Tua is going to make Devontae Parker any better. I don't think Tua is going to make, Preston Williams any better, or Mike Gesicki any better. He didn't even throw to Mike Gesicki. Mike Gesicki's like leading the team in receiving yards. He's third in receiving yards with 4 behind Jalen Waddle and like 20 behind, less than 20 behind Devontae Parker. So again, Tua doesn't throw the ball down the field. Tua doesn't add any spice to this team. So I don't know what you want to make of this. I don't know what you want to make of if you're a Dolphins fan out there. I'm sorry that you passed on Justin Herbert, because your team would probably be on fire if you had Justin Herbert. But you guys are in a tough spot. You are in a very tough spot because you do nothing well on offense, and your defense, which was supposed to be good, you do nothing well on defense. So, I think right now, I'm going to pull up side by side. Let's see this. Hold up. I didn't pull this up beforehand, so forgive me for not being prepared. But I want to compare your stats to the New York Jets. Let's just see that real quick. So, divisional rival. You guys stack up as... So, the Jets have more passing yards per game than you guys. They do better running the ball than you guys. And they have more yards per game than you guys. And their defense is better in every single metric except interceptions. So, and what this tells me is they're better on every single offensive metric except for points per game, which they are 2 points behind you guys. So what this tells me is the Dolphins are worse than the Jets. Wow. Wow. Well, hold up. Let me see who the Jets have played. All right, so easier schedule, but still, wow. I did not realize that. Wow. That's bad. So the Dolphins are literally on par with the Jets. Wow. Okay, well, that's interesting. Kind of an interesting segue into this next point. Let's go to the next story for the week. Ghosts in Carolina? Question mark. So the Panthers started off 3-0. Their defense has been great, and Sam Darnold looks like he is revived his career in North Carolina in Charlotte. And that is just slowly becoming not true. I still think it is true, and they're playing incredibly hurt. Being that they're missing their best cornerback and they're missing their best offensive piece, which you have to factor in into these games he's losing. But the biggest thing for Sam Darnold. God, this microphone is pissing me off. The biggest thing we're seeing with Sam Darnold is we're starting to see the regression to the bad turnovers. There was a few against the Cowboys that were very bad. and there was a few against the Eagles that were very bad. Very bad. However, I think that the Panthers are still going to be all right. I still think they're a very competitive team. There's a 50-50 chance, I think the last report I read, that Christian McCaffrey is going to be back this week, and he's going to and that's huge for them because Chuba Hubbard has been great through the 2 games he's played. He has more rushing yards than Christian McCaffrey in the 2 games he's played by 19. So they could run the ball with literally anybody. The only thing is we're kind of seeing DJ Moore come back to earth. Now, Darius Slay actually is playing. He graded out last week as one of the best corners in football. I think he was like tied or right behind Marshawn Lattimore, or possibly even above Marshawn Lattimore. But them losing to the Eagles, like this is the thing, right? So in the NFL, there are always, when teams look at their schedules, they look and they're like, all right, this is a game we win. This is 100% a game we win. And teams are looking at like the entire NFC East like that, except for if you're the Dallas Cowboys, right? For them to go lose to Carolina like that, to lose to Philadelphia like that, that is not a good sign because the upcoming games they have are the Minnesota Vikings, who are very talented, the Giants, who have flashed before last weekend when their entire, first-string offense died, and then they play Atlanta. They could win against the Giants in Atlanta. They could beat New England, but then they play Arizona, and they could beat Washington. Then they play Miami. Miami's the worst team in football. They could beat Miami. Then they go into the bye, and they play Atlanta again. They could beat Atlanta, but then they play Buffalo, Tampa, New Orleans, and Tampa. And we're going to see what Sam Darnold is made of in this 3-week stretch against New England, Arizona, and Washington. Because New England, very well-balanced football team, not the best offensively. The Cardinals are the second-best team in football. And Washington, who's a very beatable team, has a bad defense. We're going to see what Sam Darnold's made of in those 3 games, in my opinion. Because he needs to beat this week again. He needs to win this week against the Vikings. But the Vikings, I'm not gonna say that the Vikings are a cakewalk of a team. I can't say that if you look at the numbers. The Vikings are top 10 in every offensive metric, and they get better every week on defense. And Kirk Cousins just led an incredible game-winning drive against the Lions, but the Lions are not as bad. They're not as bad as you think. They are literally the only team in NFL history. This is not an exaggeration. They are actually the only team in NFL history to lose on 2 50-plus yard field goals with 0 seconds left on the clock. So the Lions could be 2-3, and they're better records than a lot of these teams. So the Lions aren't as bad as you think. We'll see. I still think Sam Darnold is the real deal. I think when you lose your best player, who is literally 80% of your offensive volume, that hurts DJ Moore, that hurts Robbie Anderson, that hurts Terrace Marshall, that hurts the O-line, that hurts Sam Darnold. But, if you're going to be the franchise guy, you got to be able to overcome missing your best offensive player. You got to be able to beat the Philadelphia Eagles of the world. You got to be able to beat the Atlanta Falcons. You got to even be able to beat the New York Giants. You got to be able to win those games. So I don't know. I'm not nervous about Sam Darnold, but I am pretty shocked that they lost to the Philadelphia Eagles the way they did. Being able to Phil, I have said this. If you watch our power rankings video that we release every Wednesday, I have said this every single week. Every team has an identity, right? Every team, whether it's trying to think. Let me look at the Minnesota Vikings. They have a great offense. The Carolina Panthers have a great defense, and they have one of the best, most dynamic players on their offense with Christian McCaffrey paired up with Matt Rule. You have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, whose identity is they have great, that you can't run on them, and you can't. Tom Brady's going to throw the ball make Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and Antonio Brown all 3 1,000-yard receivers. You have trying to think. Washington, whose identity was supposed to be being a great defensive front, and you can't run on them. But every good team has an identity, right? And we're slowly seeing that the Eagles' identity, though they may not be the best team, their identity is in their defense. They have a better than expected defense, and Darius Slay, who had a horrible season, is playing very well this season. He actually is playing very well despite how many points the teams are scoring on the Eagles. Darius Slay is having a great year, and he shut down DJ Moore, who's been one of the hottest receivers in the entire NFL. So, for Sam Darnold, like in that game, I wish I had the game stats for that game. Let me see if I can find them. But for Sam Darnold, in order for you to be that guy, if you want to be the franchise guy, you have to be able to spread the love, so to speak, to all your receivers. That's why, like, the Dallas Cowboys offense is so potent. Because it doesn't matter who you're covering, Dak Prescott's going to find a guy. That's why the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is so good, is because no matter who you're covering, they're going to find a guy. Even if you want to go to, like, the New York Giants, it doesn't matter who they're covering, they're going to find a guy. Kadarius Toney just had 190 yards with a backup quarterback. And nobody else was on the field. But when they are on the field, Daniel Jones is throwing it to Sterling Shepard, Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney. He's throwing it to everybody. Same thing with the Cardinals. They're throwing it to A.J. Green, Rondale Moore, DeAndre Hopkins. All of these teams do that. That's why Taylor Heineke is not a good quarterback. Because he's either throwing it to Terry McLaurin or whoever their tight end is. Logan Thomas or Ricky Seals-Jones. He's throwing it to one of the two, and if they're covered, it doesn't matter. He's still throwing it. That's why he's throwing so many interceptions when they play good teams. He should have had 3 interceptions at least in the fourth quarter against Atlanta. It's not a matter of that. That is realistically what separates good quarterbacks from bad quarterbacks. It doesn't matter the circumstances. If your best receiver is covered, you need to be able to identify mismatches elsewhere on the field. So in that game, Sam Darnold threw to DJ Moore 5 times. Or DJ Moore had 5 receptions. I wish I could see the targets. This thing isn't showing me the targets. DJ Moore had 5 catches. The rest of the team had less than 5. Robbie Anderson had 2. Terrace Marshall had 2. Tommy Tremble had 2. Ian Thomas had 4. And Chuba had 5. That tells me that you're not looking at anybody else besides DJ Moore. And teams are going to recognize that and exploit that. That is why you only put up 18 points against the Carolina Panthers. And you kind of did the same thing against the Dallas Cowboys. But for Sam Darnold, I think he is starting to kind of revert back to his old ways. I really do think that. But I think that when McCaffrey's back, he's going to be all right. And I think when McCaffrey's back, if he can stay healthy, it'll give Sam Darnold enough time to progress as a player while also still winning games. Because you can progress and lose games. That is a very real thing in the NFL. As long as you learn from your mistakes, you are becoming a better player. But you want to win as you do that. Anyways, the last story we're going to cover for this week is Zach Wilson equals Josh Allen. And this story comes from a quote that Robert Saleh had on rookie quarterback Zach Wilson. Excuse me. He said, the headline is, look where Josh Allen was through his first 5 NFL games. And I'm going to read a quote from this article. And it says, quote, the Jets are at the bottom of their division, and the play of their quarterback, Zach Wilson, is a big reason why they've struggled. Wilson is completing 75 point. Okay, so this isn't a quote. This is just in the article. Wilson is completing 57.3% of his passes with 4 touchdowns and 9 interceptions while being sacked 18 times. That adds up to a 62.9 quarterback rating, where Jets head coach Robert Saleh acknowledged on Monday is frustrating to see, while also noting that Wilson's not the first quarterback to get off to a rough start. This is the quote. It's not easy being a rookie quarterback. Never has been, never will be. Josh Allen, the first 5 games of his rookie year, the numbers were the same as what our guy is going through. I know it can be frustrating sometimes, but it's going to start clicking. It's a roller coaster ride, and you have to take the good with the bad and the bad with the bad. Or the good with the good and the bad with the bad, end quote. this is another, just to give you the numbers of what happened in this, what the numbers look like compared to Josh Allen. These were Josh Allen's stats through his first 5 games. 55.7% of his passes completed, so he had a 55.7 completion percentage with 2 touchdowns and 5 interceptions. He did add 3 rushing touchdowns, but was also sacked 19 times in his first game. So sacks are near identical. Zach Wilson has a slightly better completion percentage of 2%, with 4 less interceptions and the same amount of more touchdowns. So this is where you see a quote like this, and if you're someone like me, you're thinking to yourself, okay, what's the context? Who did Josh Allen play in his first 5 games in 2018? And this is where it kind of is like, okay, Robert Saleh, you're just wrong. So first game in his NFL career, Josh Allen played the 10-6 Ravens, and they dropped 47 points on them. The second game of Josh Allen's career, they played the 12-4 Chargers. The third game of his career, they played the Minnesota Vikings, which they won. And then they played Aaron Rodgers and the Packers at Lambeau. And then they played the Titans, in which they won. Let's look at the Jets' first 5 games this season and who they played. I forgot to pull it up. My bad. The Jets have played. It's just funny because it's like, bro, what? They've played the 3-2 Panthers, who have like one of the best defenses in the NFL. Lost. And that was their first game. So this Panthers defense has only gotten better since then, and they weren't even good that game. Plus, they almost had 3 interceptions that game against Zach Wilson. I'm only counting plays where the ball touched defenders' hands. The second game they played, the New England Patriots, who are 2-3, in which Zach Wilson threw 4 interceptions. Then they played the Broncos, where Zach Wilson threw another 2 interceptions and got shut out. And the Broncos are not a good football team. Then they played the they played the Titans, which they won, and that is best case scenario for the Jets. Their offensive line played well, their defensive line played well, and Zach Wilson played the best game of his career, and it still wasn't pretty. And then they played the Falcons, and Zach Wilson continues to turn the ball over, and the Falcons are a horrible team. So Zach Wilson is not seeing nearly as good as competition as Josh Allen did, and you could say, well, Mike, you don't know the outcome of these teams and where they're going to land at the end of the season. So let me ask you this, football fan. Where do you think do you think the Panthers are for real? Yes or no? Do you think the Patriots are for real? Yes or no? Do you think the Broncos are for real? Yes or no? Do you think the Titans are for real? Yes or no? Do you think the Falcons are for real? Yes or no? Because the Falcons are not for real. The Titans are not for real. The Broncos are not for real. The Patriots are good, but that's because they have Bill Belichick. And the Panthers were not for real when they played them. And the jury is still out. Are the Panthers for real? The competition that they're seeing is not even in the same universe. Josh Allen played 3 division. Let me see. Let me go back to make sure I'm not misquoting this. But he played the Ravens, who won their division, the Chargers, who tied for first in their division. The Vikings came in second in their division that year, going with, I think they were a 10-win team. The Bears were 12 wins. And then the Packers, you play at Lambeau. Any rookie's probably going to lose that game against Aaron Rodgers. And all of this too, the Bills had a very similar O-line compared to the Jets right now. I should have looked up where they ranked, but I didn't. And then they play the Titans, who I don't know where the Titans finished that year. Let me see, because I do have this pulled up. The Titans finished at 9-7. Is Zach Wilson beating any 9-7 teams this year? No. The Vikings finished, where are they at? 8-7. Is Zach Wilson beating any 8-7 teams this year? No. And the Packers, where are the Packers at? Packers finished 6-9 because I think Aaron Rodgers got hurt that year. And the Vikings were 8-7. The only team that Zach Wilson might beat that has a winning record by the end of the season is the Titans, and he beat their third string defense without A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. So it basically was a preseason game. in my opinion, with Ryan Tannehill playing, who has played horrible all season. So I'm not trying to take that win away from Zach Wilson, but to compare his stats to Josh Allen, context matters, and context says that Zach Wilson is playing beyond subpar to Josh Allen. So that comparison is beyond ignorant, if you want to use that word. But those are my stories for the week. We're going to talk through the most telling games of the week, as we always do. And we're going to start with a game that I think gives me another chance to hop on my soapbox. And that game is the Chargers at the Browns. Woo! So if you follow the channel, you know I just don't believe in Baker Mayfield. I think he's a terrible quarterback. And I think he's holding the Browns back by a mile. And, you know, we talked about this a little bit in the... I don't want to talk too in-depth in this segment this week because we talked a lot about the stories from this week. But let's talk about the Browns. All right? We know the Chargers are good. We have known the Chargers were good since week 1. We have known the Chargers are good since they drafted Justin Herbert. We know Justin Herbert gets better every week. We know the Chargers get better every week. We know Brian Staley is the real deal when he's as a head coach. We know what the Chargers are. But do we know what the Cleveland Browns are? Really? Do we know how they stack up as a competitor? Do we know what they look like in the postseason? Do we know what limits them? Because I would argue yes. I would argue that the Browns have played the best game they will probably play all season. To score 42 points with no turnovers is beyond impressive. That is enough to beat any other team in the NFL. It is. But the reason why I'm penalizing the Browns for this loss is because how they played when it mattered. And Colin Cowherd, someone that said this, he said this before on his show, and he's 100% spot on about it. I never thought about it, but he is 100% spot on. Your head coach will tell you what he believes in his franchise quarterback by how they play the fourth quarter. How did the Browns play that fourth quarter? How did they play that 2-minute after Sam, oh my gosh, my brain. After Justin Herbert went down and scored the game-leading touchdown in spectacular fashion, carved up that defense, continued to carve it up all night, how did you play that fourth quarter? Running it on 3rd and 10 to give Justin Herbert the ball back. How did you play it on... What did Baker Mayfield look like on his fourth quarter game-winning drive? 21 yards, checked down 3 times. They're not keeping Baker Mayfield. How you have Nick Chubb rush for 161 yards and your running back scored 3 touchdowns and Baker Mayfield only scored 2, where you have on the other side, like, let's not forget that Baker Mayfield was a number 1 overall selection. Justin Herbert, who is the number 6 overall selection, threw for 4 touchdowns and ran one in and rushed for 4 attempts for 29 yards, where Baker Mayfield ran for 2 attempts for 8 yards with a fumble. They aren't even in the same class as each other. Baker Mayfield isn't even in the same class as Justin Herbert. And Baker Mayfield's good. He's an accurate quarterback when he doesn't have to throw. But when you put the ball in Baker's hands and he has to throw and he has to win a game, the result is 21 yards. I'm sorry, but that's it. And you're not even confident enough to have him throw the ball on 3rd and 10 that you run it with Kareem Hunt on 3rd and 10. And give Justin Herbert, who has carved your defense up all day, the ball back. And what do you think he's going to do with it? He just dropped 41 on you at this point. You think they're punting? Come on. Justin Herbert was 26 for 43 with 400 yards, 9.3 yards per attempt with 4 touchdowns and a QBR of 85. Baker Mayfield was 23 for 32 with 305 yards, 9.5 yards, 2 touchdowns, 9.5 yards on average, 2 touchdowns, and here's the kicker, a QBR of 53.2. That tells me he's scared. That tells me he does not want the ball in the fourth quarter. That tells me he's not your guy. everything about Baker Mayfield in these close games just screams he's not your guy. He's not going to lead you to a Super Bowl. And by the way, if you're a Browns fan, your Super Bowl window is closing. It is. Every game matters. Every season matters. And as long as you have Baker Mayfield, you'll never make it past the divisional round of the playoffs. You won't. Because what's going to happen when you play good teams like the Chargers, who you probably will see in the playoffs? This is what's going to happen. The ball's going to be in Baker Mayfield's hands in the fourth quarter, and what's he going to do? Give you 21 yards and check down 3 times? I'm not even this isn't a hot take. This is just what happens. Baker Mayfield, since he has entered the league in 2018, leads all quarterbacks who have played since 2018 in fourth quarter interceptions. People want to crap all over Eli Manning for being a bad quarterback, but Eli Manning was probably the best fourth quarter quarterback, maybe of all time. Sure, he wasn't great in the regular season, but when it mattered, he played. When it matters for Baker Mayfield, he chokes badly. To hit 3 check down, if you check down 3 times in the fourth quarter, you aren't even trying to win the game. You're not even trying to get into field goal range. You have to gamble. You have to trust your receivers enough to go make a play. In what universe does Odell Beckham have 2 catches for 20 yards? If I'm playing quarterback, I'm throwing it to Odell Beckham literally every other play. He's the most he at one point was the most dynamic playmaker in the NFL, and you guys have just killed his career because Baker Mayfield is a coward. He is a coward in the fourth quarter. Man, it's just upsetting because the Browns have been a poverty franchise for so long, and you finally are at the precipice of being good and being Super Bowl contenders, and you have this kid who Kevin Stefanski didn't draft him, their GM didn't draft him, and he's killing everything you built. He is killing it. Not in a good way. And he can't win on the road. He's 1-2 on the road this season. So your two losses came on the road, and you were losing to Tyrod Taylor and the Texans before he got hurt. So this kid can't even outduel Tyrod Taylor. The next game we're going to talk about, probably my favorite game to talk about all week, Baltimore at Indianapolis. So this is funny to me because there are still people out there who think Lamar Jackson is a bad quarterback. Lamar Jackson isn't a top 5 quarterback. Lamar Jackson isn't good. He's not good. He can't win in the clutch. He can't win from behind. He's not consistent. He's not a pocket passer. And I just say to that, he can't win from behind. He's not consistent. I could just say to that, have you looked at the numbers? Because everything you just said is wrong. Have you watched a Ravens game? Because everything you just said is wrong. Oh, Lamar Jackson has never produced a 1,000-yard receiver. Okay, let's look at his receivers since he's entered the league. The best receiver he's had, Marquise Brown, who was a rookie when Lamar was starting. His second best receiver, Mark Andrews, who is a tight end. His third best receiver hasn't stepped on the field yet. Lamar Jackson hasn't had the opportunity to produce a 1,000-yard receiver because of the talent they have surrounded him with on the perimeter. Marquise Brown is, by the way, is on pace for 1,000 yards. By the way. And Lamar Jackson needs off-script plays to win. He needs plays to break down for him to throw the ball down the field. Lamar Jackson only had 14 carries last game, in which I think 6 of them came in the fourth quarter because his hip is bothering him and he doesn't want to run the ball. But more importantly, Lamar Jackson is not a good passer. Okay, he has broken pretty much every passing record that the Baltimore Ravens have as a franchise. He just threw 40 times. And actually, this is a good point to make that I'm going to make. I didn't even think about it, but I'm going to connect these dots here. We like to say Justin Herbert is a great pocket passer, right? Justin Herbert is a great deep ball passer. Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert, ironically, just threw the exact same amount of times at 43. Justin Herbert completed 26 of his passes. How many did Lamar Jackson complete? Oh, 37. with a completion percentage of 86 and a QBR of 71.6 and a passer rating of 140.5 with 4 throwing touchdowns. Mark Andrews, 11 receptions, 147 yards, 2 touchdowns. Marquise Brown, 125 yards, 2 touchdowns. Long, 43 yards on 10 targets. Mark Andrews, 11 receptions on 13 targets. Oh, and does anybody know what the score differential was at this game going into the second half? Oh, yeah, 23 or 25-3. No, excuse me. It was going into the fourth quarter. Trying to do math. Going into the fourth quarter, it was 22-3. And Lamar Jackson overcame a 19-point deficit to put the game into overtime and win the game. So please tell me why isn't Lamar Jackson top 5? Why isn't he elite quarterback? I'd love to hear it. Who's playing better than him right now? And by how much? Tom Brady? Aaron Rodgers? Because I would say no. Josh Allen? Yeah. Patrick Mahomes? No. Patrick Mahomes is almost leading the league in turnovers and interceptions right now through 5 weeks. Kyler Murray? They're on par. Let's look at something real quick. Let's see. Lamar Jackson through 5 games. And these are against good teams, okay? These are against. Hold up, I don't want to see all season types. I want to see regular season. Through 5 games, has played Las Vegas, good team. Chiefs, good team. Detroit, a very sneakily good team. Not great, but they should be at least 2-3. Denver, who is 3-0, and the Colts, who are the best 1-4 team in the NFL. They will win the AFC South. They're also I didn't know this, but they are just as much injured as the Ravens. And let's see Lamar Jackson's QBR through the 5 games. First game, 98.6. Second game, 78.8. His worst game. Third game, 81. Fourth game, 96.2. Fifth game, 140.5. Throwing the ball 30 times per game with a completion percentage that only gets better. He had a rough stretch against Denver and Detroit, but Denver has the best secondary in football, and Detroit's not bad. But against the Chiefs and Las Vegas, who have the Chiefs have a bad defense. He had 78.8, but against Las Vegas, who has a pretty good secondary, he was 98.6 in his QBR, completing 63.3% of his passes, and against the Chiefs, 69.2% of his passes. And I mean, there's nothing you can say about this kid that's not of why he's not a top 5 quarterback. He has 1,519 yards on the season with 8 touchdowns. He's averaging a QBR of 104.4, which is well above league average, and he's having 303.8 yards per game. I mean, you could sit there and say he's bad, but you're just wrong. You are literally just wrong. He has played against good competition. He has beaten good competition. He has overcome deficits. He has played from behind. He is passing the ball at an efficient rate. What do you want to say about him? Because whatever you say, the numbers say you're wrong. The numbers say you're wrong, and his play on the field says you're wrong. He's passing from the pocket. Sure, he's taking advantage of broken down plays, but that's what good quarterbacks do. Why would he throw to someone who's not open on a broken down play? That's such a bad argument. And that's so stupid to say that every play is broken down, that he's completing the passes downfield. He threw the 43-yard touchdown was a dot to Marquise Brown to open the third quarter. You're just wrong. You are literally just wrong. And the numbers just scream to you you're wrong. Anyway, to wrap it up, we're only going to go for about 5 minutes. We're gonna do call your shots again. This is a segment that we had last week that I kind of stole from Good Morning Football. But basically, what it is I'm predicting something to happen in each game for this week in the NFL. Last week, foolishly, I didn't post my takes, but I was right on a lot of them, actually. Very, to my surprise. I was like 75% right on all of them. Some of them were like partially wrong, but let's go into it. So just a reminder, teams on bye for week 6. The Saints, Jets, Falcons, 49ers. And so let's go. With Buccaneers at Eagles, I think that the Buccaneers outgamed the Eagles, forcing 2 turnovers and winning by 10 points. There is this narrative that because the Eagles beat the Panthers, the Eagles are now a sneakily competitive team. I don't subscribe to that at all. Jalen Hurts is still not playing well. A lot of his yards come in garbage time. The Eagles are also not a good coach team offensively. To rush for 3 times in a game is completely unacceptable in the NFL. You just can't do that. You have to be able to run the ball. And you have to run the ball even if it's not working because it opens up different aspects of the game. It opens up play action. Brian Staley talked about an aspect of physicality that you're willing to bring to the team, and I think that's right. So I think the Bucs forced 2 turnovers on Jalen Hurts. I think they probably make him fumble and they pick him off once. But the Bucs secondary is very banged up. So if the Eagles score a lot of points, it's not because the Eagles have consistently scored against bad defenses. So we'll see how they stack up against a banged up Bucs secondary. But I still think the Bucs win by 10 and force 2 turnovers. Chiefs at Washington. I think that the Chiefs edge out Washington by 7 points, and Heineke continues to turn the ball over. Washington has a very bad defense, so I'm expecting a huge game from Terry McLaurin. But again, I think that Taylor Heineke's mistakes will catch up with him, and they have caught up with him against good defenses like the Saints and the Bills. I don't know if he'll throw too many picks this game, but I would expect at least one. And I think that the Chiefs win by 7. They're just a way stronger team on offense. And their defense isn't as bad as well, no, their defense is bad, but I don't think Taylor Heinicke is going to take advantage of that at all. And then Las Vegas, the Rams at Giants. I think Matthew Stafford takes advantage of a banged-up Giants team and throws for 400 yards. And I think it's cut off there, and 3 touchdowns. So I'll get that fixed for when we post this on Instagram, because we will post these on Instagram this week. But Texans at Colts. I think Jonathan Taylor stays hot with 2 touchdowns against the Texans. The Colts advance to 2-4. So I'm saying that they're going to win that game and that Jonathan Taylor will score 2 touchdowns. Joe Burrow Bengals at Lions. Joe Burrow dismantles the Lions' weak secondary, throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, I think that the Lions are a better team than everybody thinks. They don't deserve to be 0-5. They don't, truly. And they come out and they fight every week. Dan Campbell is crying about it, that he's so proud of them for fighting every week. But I think that the Bengals are a good team. I think the Bengals are probably one of the best teams the Lions are going to play all season, and have played all season. I think the Bengals are not a team that is a fluke 3-2. They should have beaten the Packers this past weekend, but it was a kicking fiasco. And I think that Joe Burrow continues to roll and continues to take apart the Lions, throwing 3 touchdowns. Next games, I think that Packers at Bears. I have really no idea what to make of the Bears, but I think Justin Fields and the Bears give Packers a run for their money, scoring 3 touchdowns. I think and I should clarify, Justin Fields will throw or run a total of 3 touchdowns. So 2 rushing, 1 throwing, or 3 passing, or any combination. I think Justin Fields is going to give him a run for money. I think that Jair Alexander is on IR. Maybe Allen Robinson finally has a good game. It is a divisional game, so there is that aspect to it. So we'll see. And then Chargers at Ravens. This is going to be the best game of the week. It's the most exciting game of the week to watch, in my opinion, next to Cardinals at Browns. But I think Lamar Jackson and the Ravens fall just short against the hottest team in football, which is the LA Chargers, throwing due to turnovers. Lamar Jackson has turned the ball over. That is his one knock. He is not taking care of the football. I don't think he had a pick against the Colts, and I don't think he did have a fumble against the Colts on the 1-yard line. But the Chargers are a team that does not turn the ball over. They just scored 47 points without a single turnover, which is very impressive. So I think the turnover differential will be the determining factor in this game, and I think that the Chargers are going to take advantage of that and beat the Ravens in a very close game. Vikings at Panthers. I think Vikings stars Justin Jefferson, and then either Alexander Madison or Dalvin Cook, whoever plays, have 100-plus yards, and Darnold throws an interception. I think Darnold's going to continue to turn the ball over. I think that, unless McCaffrey's back. If McCaffrey's back, this could change. And if I'll see the reports say, I think it's a game-time decision at this point, so I'll have to just pick my poison. But I think that Sam Darnold will throw another pick. I also think Kirk Cousins will probably throw a pick, too. I could have put that in there. But Cardinals at Browns, I think in their first loss of the season, the Cardinals fall short to Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and the defense. Don't think it has anything to do with Baker Mayfield. I think he's going to manage the game. I think if it's close, they'll lose. If it goes into the fourth quarter and it's a close game, Baker Mayfield is going to have a fourth quarter drive with 21 yards again. So I'm taking Kyler Murray over. Kyler Murray, again, another number 1 overall pick that's compared to Baker Mayfield, picked a year later, is beyond outclassing Baker Mayfield in every aspect. He's better thrower, he's better runner, he's a better athlete. He's not big. He's ironically one of the only quarterbacks who's not bigger than Baker Mayfield, but he is in every aspect better than Baker Mayfield. So if it's going to be close, it's going to be because of Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and the defense. Again, like Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray is turning the ball over, which Baker Mayfield is not because he doesn't really have the opportunity to. He rushed for 2 yards, and one of those rushes ended up in a fumble. So maybe Baker Mayfield tries to do more than he could, he'll fumble, and Cardinals can take advantage of that. But Cardinals are probably the hottest team in football besides the Chargers. At 5-0, they're the only 5-0 team, but I think this defense is very good. Even though it just got gashed by the Chargers, I think that the defense is still very, very good. The Browns defense, that is. Raiders at Broncos, another divisional game. I think with their interim head coach, the Raiders beat the Broncos by 10-plus points. This game I definitely could be wrong about because I still am not sold that the Broncos are bad, but I'm more so banking on the stat of interim head coaches win games. So for that reason, I'm taking the Raiders. Might not be by 10 points. That could be a dumb take. But last takes for the week. Again, reminder, Saints, Jets, Falcons, and 49ers are on byes. I think Cowboys at Patriots. Zeke and Tony Pollard both rush for under 80 yards, and Trayvon Diggs keeps his interception streak alive. I'm definitely taking the Cowboys to win this week, but I think that the Patriots defense is, especially their run defense, is way better than advertised. And I think that Mac Jones is going to have a very tough time with Trayvon Diggs. Maybe. He might not actually even throw at Trayvon Diggs because Mac Jones doesn't throw the ball too far down the field. But if he does, hopefully he doesn't throw at Trayvon Diggs because that will be picked off. And then Seahawks at Steelers, Super Bowl rematch. I think Najee Harris rushes for over 100 yards and finds the end zone twice in a dominant upset. I don't really know if this is technically an upset because of Russell Wilson's status, but I'm taking the Steelers to win this game pretty handily. If Big Ben plays as good as he did, and we don't know what to expect from Geno Smith, I think Geno Smith probably will have a good game, but I think Najee Harris is going to run all over this team. The Seahawks are one of the worst run defenses in the NFL, and they're one of the worst defenses in the NFL. I think they're ranked 31st or 30th. They're bad. They're like really bad. Jamal Adams, been horrible all year. The Jets look like they fleeced the Seahawks in that trade, so good for the Jets. Happy for them. And the Seahawks are falling apart. There's no chance, in my opinion, that Russell Wilson goes back to Seattle. I think he's going to go somewhere else. And then last game, Bills at Titans. Titans are supposed to be a good team. I don't buy it. They're 3-2. I really do not think that the Titans are a good team. The Bills dominate the Titans, sacking Ryan Tannehill 4+ times and holding Derrick Henry to 100 or less rushing yards. That is my take. I think that this Bills D-line is criminally underrated. I think they're the best defense in football, and people aren't subscribing to it yet, but it is true. Anyways, those are my predictions for Week 6. That's going to do it for the podcast episode. If you liked what you heard and you're watching on YouTube, please like, comment, subscribe. If you're listening to us on Spotify, please recommend us to a friend, post us on your Instagram story, give us a shout-out, do something, help us out. And then a lot of these takes and things are condensed and put on Instagram. I'm going to start clipping shorts to post on Instagram so you can hear just brief, 2-minute takes of the stuff we talk about in these episodes. And then we also are on Twitter at Pylon_the. So if you want to check out our social media, check out our YouTube channel. We are posting videos every week. We try to post videos like during the week, every weekday. We're going to try to post content every day. But this is a one-man show for right now, so bear with me. But anyways, and as always, thank you for watching, and we will catch you in the next episode. Peace!